Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Team Param Vedanta warmly welcomes you to session 14 of Pancadashi, the powerful Vedantic text authored by the great warrior saint Swami Vidyaranya. In the 7th chapter, Swami Vidyaranya takes us systematically through 7 stages of our spiritual evolution, beginning with realizing our ignorance or ajnana, to finally discovering our true nature of being, which is that of tripti, complete fulfillment. We are now in the stage of understanding the compulsions of the material world, which constantly throws experiences at us, some favorable, some unfavorable. The question is, how do we go through these experiences? Completely immersed in them as bhoktas, enjoying and suffering in turn, or with detachment, trusting that they are necessary evils in our spiritual journey? In today's class, we will learn how to do this and also move on to the final part of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad shloka, Shariram Anusanjvaret. Before we begin today's important class, I request Mamta to please help us recollect what we learned in the previous class. Over to you, Mamta.
Thank you. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Today we will do the recap of the verses 192 to 210 of chapter 7 of Panchadashi that we learnt in detail in the previous session. In the next slide, Vidyaranya takes up analyzing the second part of the second line of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, that is Kasya Kamaya, from verse 192 onwards. Kasya Kamaya means for whose sake is this enjoyment or experience in life is. Vidyaranya says we have to inquire or analyze the non-reality nature of bokta, the experiencer, by demonstrating that our true nature is pure consciousness, which is asanga, that is untouched or not affected. Let us take a look at it with an example. When I say I would like to read a book or I would like a cup of coffee, who is this I? Also known as bhokta, the self, or experiencer of whatever is happening around us. In other words, experiencer of the worldly objects. In the next slide, for this profound question, Vidyaranya gives 3 possible scenarios. First, is bhokta the pure, unchanging original consciousness? Second, is bhokta the reflected consciousness? Third, or is bhokta a mixture of the two? We will use the terms OC for original consciousness, RC for reflected consciousness in the rest of the presentation. In the next slide, bhoga, the experience, is subject to change due to our identification with pain and pleasure associated with worldly objects. The experiencer, bhokta, who is experiencing the changes, also is subject to change. And the ever-changing experience is due to ever-changing thoughts in the mind. Kutastha Chaitanya, the OC, the absolute reality, illumines or reveals the changing conditions of the mind and is not affected by what is revealed. Like, for example, a sad thought makes us experience sadness. Happy thought makes us experience happiness and makes us happy. OC reveals the sadness, happiness in us, but remains unchanged and is asanga or unaffected by the sadness or happiness. Unchanging, unaffected consciousness to be the bhokta, the experiencer of the worldly objects, which is subject to change, is a contradiction. So Vidyaranya rules out the possibility of kutastha being bhokta. In the next slide, In verse 196, Vidyaranya looks at the possibility of RC being bhokta. RC is the reflection of thoughts associated with object that results in experience with changing thoughts. For example, happy, sad, angry thought. RC is also changing, that is experiencing happiness, sadness, and so on. And hence, RC is also subject to change. Bhokta is the experiencer who experiences whose experience is associated with the object and it is subject to change. And RC, as we just saw, is also subject to change. In this scenario, can changing RC by itself be a changing bhokta? Reflected consciousness, being a reflection, cannot have an existence of its own. It requires OC, the underlying absolute reality, for its existence. So, RC, although it appears as experiencing the objects, it cannot exist on its own without OC. Hence, RC on its own cannot be Bhokta, and Vidyaranya negates RC being Bhokta as well. This leads us to the third option in the analysis of Kasya Kamaya. That is, the combination of RC and OC should be the Bhokta. Scriptures say Bhokta, the experiencer, is a mixture of RC and OC, with OC as the substratum from the worldly perspective, and it is only a intermediary step. From absolute perspective, which is the reality, which is the only reality, this bhokta eventually has to culminate in kutastha, that is original consciousness, or abhokta for the seeker. So now, if we are the OC, the abhokta, and it is the absolute reality or truth, and OC can't be the bhokta or experiencer, then how do we explain the experience we are having all the time? For example, to be specific, who is the one who is experiencing this class we are having now? In the next slide, in verse 200, Vidyaranya elaborates on the confusion surrounding bhokta, which is a mixture of RC and OC. Due to lack of discrimination or confusion, we fail to differentiate between RC and OC. Vidyaranya's analysis shows that in the first stage, the RC, in other words, every experience of ours or the experiencer status, is superimposed on abhokta, the original consciousness. Analogy could be the red color of the red flower in close proximity is superimposed on colorless crystal, making the crystal appear as red. In case of who is experiencing the class, the experiencer's experience is superimposed on OC, and we say we are experiencing the class. And in the second stage, the reality of the original consciousness is transferred onto the reflected consciousness. In other words, it is transferred onto what we experience. Like in the rope snake example, we mistakenly say it is a snake. The isness which is associated with snake really does not belong to the snake because there is no snake. But the isness of the rope, which is the reality, is borrowed and transferred to snake, and the snake appears as real. Similarly, due to confusion or non-discrimination, we look upon ourselves as real bhokta. We want experiences to continue. We are aware that these experiences involve bondage, pleasure, pain, sorrow, so on, but we don't want to give it up. We, however, have to realize that experiences do come to an end, and I, the OC, alone is eternal, and I am that original consciousness. In the next slide, in reference to these objects of experience, Vidyaranya says, the seeker who understands that true source of happiness or love is not from any objects in the world, but it is from Bhokta, the self, that seeker becomes dispassionate towards objects and with strong conviction and commitment enters into self-inquiry of who am I, consisting of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. In the next slide or the last slide, the method of self-inquiry is discussed in the verse 210, last verse in the set of verses to recap. In the path to self-inquiry through Guru Shastra Upadesha, the method for discrimination of the self or Atma and non-self, which is body, mind, sense complex or Anatma, something called Anvaya Vyatireka is elaborated in verse 210. Analyzing the three states of experience, the waking, dream, and deep sleep, with Anvaya Vyatireka method, we should be able to discover the essential or true nature of bokta. Anvaya is non variable, something that is always present in all three states of experience and also the three periods of time, that is the past, present, and future, and does not undergo change, which is original consciousness. And Vyatireka is variable, which undergoes change, comes and goes, which is reflected consciousness. With this discernment, one realizes, oh, see, the original consciousness illumines the changing conditions of the mind, and that unchanging consciousness is I am. Thank you, sir. Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Mamta, for wonderful work. You've been able to understand this difficult topic to know who is the real experiencer when we experience everything, and how brilliantly Vidyaranya Swami uses this aspect of the experiencer to help us to discover our true nature. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Namah Shri Shankarananda Guru Padambu Janmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Graseka Karmane Atmanam Ched Vijaniyat Ayam Asmiti Purushaha Kimichan Kasya Kamaya Shariram Anusanjvaret. We are now come to the concluding aspect of this great mantra from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which Vidyaranya Swami has explained very thoroughly. Using 134 verses, the first line has been explained, which is a Mahavakya, and which is what something we have to grasp, that our true nature is not this limited body-mind complex referred to here as Purusha, but our true nature is Atma. Swamiji always talks of Atma as consciousness, not part of the body, not a product of the body. It is an independent entity which is all-pervading, not limited to the boundaries of the body. Functioning, it makes the body alive. When the body drops, the consciousness does not become manifest because for want of the body, but it still continues to exist. Now, we have now come to the second line, which is the benefit of knowing. And the benefit of knowing is true fulfillment or tripti, wherein the bhoga vastu of the world, which I now know is mithya, should not affect me. In this class, we will be concluding the discussion of Kasya Kamaya, for whose sake, who is that experiencer in all of us? Who is then one who enjoys or suffers every experience? And very seamlessly, we will shift to the last part to understand about our own bodies, the three bodies, Shariram Anusanjvaret. Now, as we are reaching the beginning of the end, we should have a clear roadmap of what we are here for. I would like to take a comparison between the way we train people who, after their medical graduation, come to us to be trained as neurosurgeons. We have a definite roadmap for them that they are here for about 5 or 6 years. And in the course of this time, that limited time that they have, we should be able to transmit all the skills that we know to be able to understand about the brain, the spinal cord. And whenever a person comes with any problem related to the brain and spinal cord, which requires a surgical intervention, how they are able to confidently handle it. After 5 or 6 years, there is an examination. And once the examination is over, they are qualified. It does not mean that after 5 to 6 years, they are fully qualified. They have got the essential insights. They now know what is to be known. And then, but they have that a basic amount of confidence to start working on their own, and the rest of their life they build skills on it. So too, the whole journey of spiritual awakening is going through a program called Jnana Yoga. In Jnana Yoga, we are here for a little longer period of time. Just like our students are here for about 6 years, I would say that this sort of interaction between teacher and student should be required maybe for about 10 years. In this part of 10 years, the first line of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad should be very clear that I am Atma Brahma. I don't see myself now as a limited ego or ahankar. Why is this important? Because the teachers have told that within all of us, as you see that two-bird example in the Mundaka, that within all of us, there are two. Normally, we think of ourselves as this body-mind complex, which is constantly doing something or the other, karta and bokta. Now, the Upanishad calls that as the lower self. The teachers now give us words of introduction. What is this words of introduction? I know I am conscious, I'm not able to experience. Just like in the 10th man example, the 10th man was given not words of information, he was given the words of introduction. He was desperately looking for the 10th man and he was suffering. He had injured his head in the process by beating his head against a tree. He had developed a bump on the head. He was very distressed. But the teacher very skillfully says that the one that you're looking for is none other than yourself. In the course of these years that we have been together, and especially after studying an advanced text like Tripti Deepa, a student is now clear in that 134 verses that we worked on the first line. I am no longer a seeker. I am no longer a sadhaka. I am very clear that I am Atma Brahma. Therefore, the teacher now clearly tells us from now on, moksha cannot be your goal because that is your swarupa, that is your real nature. And therefore, in a way, you are already free. And that ignorance of our true nature has been revealed. Now, this is something that has to be caught. This is something the teacher can give, but the student should be able to be sensitive enough to grasp it. And that is the importance of all this satsanga. So the student, when they are listening to the teacher, suddenly at some moment says, yes, I have got it. After that, you don't have to continue to be on this master student the lifelong. There is an end period, just like the students will say thank you and go away. From then on, the real life practice. I may not be a Jnana Nishta. Jnana Nishta takes many years, but now I am a Jnani. I know about my true nature. From now on, I'm extremely grateful. My whole life is an expression of grateful living. I'm grateful for every moment. I'm grateful for the gift of my body. I'm grateful for the gift of my mind. I'm grateful for the gift of my acharyas, my family, my possessions, and this whole life which has given me an opportunity to discover my true nature. We have reached a particular stage. And in the course of this Tripti Deepa itself, Swamiji at this stage, as we are coming to the conclusion, will give you a little test. And I'm preparing you for not the final examination, but as a preparatory examination. All the students, imagine Swamiji is on the hall, he's on the stage, he's waiting for all the students to come. All the students are standing at the back of the hall, and he invites you to come to a hall. And he says there are two rows of chairs. One is to Swamiji sit in front, and he's saying to my left and to my right. All those who are clear that I am Atma Brahma, who have got this knowledge, please sit on to the right. All those who have not yet got it, please sit on the left. And all those who are not too sure whether they have got it or not, you can sit in any of the back rows. Now, this is our brief. I want you to come forwards. All of you have been together between 3 to 10 years or so. And I want you to take your seats. Are you very clear? Has there been a change in my mindset? Has there been a paradigm shift? Has there been a change in the way we look at ourselves? Are we still looking at ourselves as that limited ego which is struggling all the time? Or do we now see ourselves as I am Atma Brahma? I am for the time being struggling through this limited body-mind complex. As body-mind complex, I have so much roles to play, but I am very clear I'm here only for a time pass. I have nothing really to do because now I have discovered my true nature, and therefore from now on, I live my life gratefully. I don't need to do any sadhana for the sake of spiritual awakening, because spiritual awakening is already there. All I need to move is from jnanam to jnana nishtam. In today's verse, we come to the concluding part of kasya kamaya. Kasya kamaya means who is the experiencer. In the last recap, Mamata very nicely analyzed exactly who is the one who is the experiencer. Is it the original consciousness? It cannot be the original consciousness. Is it the reflected consciousness, which by itself, it is the mixture? But how brilliantly Vidyaranya uses it to help us to discover our true nature. Vidyaranya collects some of the best verses from the scriptures to illustrate what he's trying to say. This verse from the Kaivalya Upanishad, I do not know, although this is 215 here, but I think this must be the 17th verse in the Kaivalya Upanishad, which goes like this: Trishu damasu yad bhogyam bokta bhogasya cha yad badet tebhyo vilakshana sakshi chinmatroham sadashiva. In this verse, there is a clear distinction about two aspects, which will come when Dr. Sanjay Mehrotra will explain to us. Dr. Sanjay, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Thank you very much, sir. Can I have my first slide, please? So in the introduction of what I'm going to talk, some of it has been already covered and most of it Dr. Hegde has already described. So what is the important part of understanding is that one who considers Atma to be one alone in waking, dreaming, and sleeping state, and one who considers himself beyond these three states is relieved of Punarapi Jananam and Punarapi Maran. So what do you mean by that? So this distinction between that who is the real seer, who's using his mind-body complex, and what is making that mind-body complex to be able to perceive. These are the two different understandings one has to realize. And once you realize that I am not that who is cognizing using the mind or brain complex. I am that which is giving sentience to this Jivatma, which along with that original consciousness which was discussed, which is reflecting through this mind-body complex, gives you a feeling that I am the real seer. But the real seer is one who is eternal, who is not affected by anything or has got no attributes. Next slide, sir. So the verse which was introduced by Dr. Hegde is again the same verse which says, Trishu dhamasu yad bhogyah bhogyam bhokta bhogascha yad bhavet tebhyo vilakchanah sakshi chinmatro aham sadashiva. So what do you mean by Trishu dhamasu? In the three states, yad bhogyam, that which is the object of experience. So in the three states, which is your waking, dreaming, and sleeping, yad bhogyam, which is the object of experience, the bhokta. So who is the bhokta? The experiencer. And what is the bhoga? The experience. That which becomes chinmatram. pure consciousness, ever auspicious. So what do you mean by that? We will explain. We'll go to the next slide. Now, who is this I? And I think we have already given an introduction. Is this I is a jnani or an ajnani? This is my question. The Upanishad will tell this ajnani I is the mixture of two, which is the sakshi, which is the witness, or you can call it the original consciousness, and the other one is called the ahankara. So the sense of I-ness along with that which has got no attribute becomes you, and that is an ajnani I. And this is also called in Tattvabodha language Chit and Chidabhasha, which are inseparable. The Chit part or the Sakshi is the changeless part, which I have already explained to you, which is the eternal part. The very existence of Chidabhasha requires Sakshi. So if that sentience in you, which is your higher self or the higher I, is not there, this ajnani I will not be able to cognize everything or understand everything. So here comes an interesting understanding that the pure Sakshi and Chidabhasha both cannot be claimed to be I. What do you mean by that? That because the Sakshi cannot understand itself unless there is a experiencer. So the experiences which is we as Jivatma, which is because of that conglomeration of the higher I and my ahankara, is called Chidabhasha. And this Chidabhasha has no existence of its own because it is being given the existence because of that eternal or the original consciousness because of which you are able to perceive. So both are very difficult to understand unless you sort of try to differentiate between that which has no attribute is being providing sentience to something by which you understand the attributes. And this is an important understanding. Next slide, sir. Therefore, really speaking, the bokta I is a mixture of bokta Chidabhasha, because Chidabhasha is always a bokta, and abhokta Sakshi. What do you mean by abhokta? Because it has no existence of its own. It is abhokta, but it has to represent itself through a bhokta, which hides behind the bhokta Chidabhasha. This is important to understand. So the verse says, Tris Dhamasu, the three abode states, and the experiencer of those three states, bhokta, and that which is the experience, which is the object generating the experience. This is all the Chidabhasa experiencer. Now, I am that Sadashiva, which is different. Now, this is the learning you get out of this verse, that I am that Sadashiva, which is Vilakshana, which has got no attributes. But when it's become attributed, which is what is your false understanding, you become a Jivatma, or you become the lower I. The one which is Sadashiva is ever auspicious one. So it is highlighting the value of that eternal I, which is your consciousness. Next slide, sir. Evam vivechite tatve vijnanamaya shabditah chidabhasho vikari yo bhoktratvam tasya shishyate. Now, what do you mean by that? Evam vivechite. In this way, analyze. So vivechana is the word here. Vivechana means when you analyze. Tattve means the nature of truth and reality. Vijnanamaya shabditah. One who has understood this word, Chidabhasha, which is subject to change, because Chidabhasha is the changing part of that behind which your original consciousness is there, which is vikari. Now, what do you mean by vikari? Vikari means which is subject to modification. It's a vikara, it changes. Shishyate remains. What remains? Now, this is the understanding we have to get from the expression of this verse. Next slide, sir. So there are there are these two tattvas which we have to understand. One is chit and other is chidabhasha, which we have explained. When the bokta of any experience is to be expressed, it is always associated with the sakshi, the enjoyer of the experience, plus the enjoyer of the experience, not the sakshi. It is the sakshi plus the enjoyer of the experience, because bhokta has no ability to understand it and anything without the sakshi. So whatever a bhokta is experiencing, it is because of that sentience, because of this original consciousness, he becomes an enjoyer, which also means that there is always a contact, a sambandha with the object of enjoyment. Now it is very simple. That you see an object of enjoyment, for example, an ice cream, so you become an ice cream bhokta. Bhoktatva stated needs some bhogya sambandha. That means without the object, a bhoga is not possible. Now, how the object is perceived? By your brain, by your mind-body complex. What makes it perceive? You feel that I am perceiving it, that becomes your chidabhasha. So what is the source of interaction of chidabhasha? Say here the mind, which is given the ability to cognize and is a bhokta here. Divined by what? Sakshi or chit. This is the understanding we have to get by these words. Next slide, sir. So the Upanishad gives that knowledge to the seeker when he does the self-inquiry. When the self-inquiry is undertaken, one will understand oneself to be the mixture of two components. What? The chidabhasha amsa and chitamsha. These are the two important things. So any experience, the bhoktatva is inevitable, which means it would have modification. So bhoktatva will have modification and chit has no modification. Next slide, sir. So anything which is subject to modification is not eternal, very well understood. But from the chidabhasha angle, I am bhokta, and from chit angle, I am abhokta. So this understanding, Vidyaranya is calling Vijnanamaya Shabdita. So chidabhasha is vikari, subject to change. The Upanishad would teach to negate the lower stated, which is the bhokta status, with the help of parisheshanaya, which is a process of exclusion, which is to exclude the bhoktatvam state, which is left in the chit, which is the higher status, which is without vikas. And how it is done will be described in the 217th verse. Thank you very much. Hari Om, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay, for an excellent explanation. Whenever you hear all these things, you find it, however well explained by anybody, you will have your own difficulty in understanding. The only exercise that we know has to do is what Dr. Sanjay did, what Mamta did. Take these verses, listen to what the teacher has said, and try to explain this to somebody. Then you realize the difficulty in words. Even if you have understood this, there is so much of difficulty. You will be trying to use words, but the whole process, the whole struggle that you do, something that the teacher is trying to say is clear. At least I would like you to say, can this be the take-home message, that I'm going to study these verses in a way by trying to teach this to somebody, and therefore in the process, I may learn something. Trishudamasu. This is a great verse. Take this verse by itself. Trishudamasu yad bhogyam bhokta yad bhaved bhogasya yad bhaved tebhyo vilakshana sakshishchin matroham sadashiva. The traditional teaching is to give these verses that you have to internalize. Let it be in your mind. Don't worry about the meaning, but when the meaning is given, internalize it. What the teacher is trying to say is, there are two people in all of us. There is the chidabhasa, what was explained, that is the body-mind complex, and the sakshi, which are very clear and distinct. The Kena Upanishad has got a very nice verse, Prati Bodha Viditam Matam. You are listening to me. Who is listening? There are two listeners. One is the body-mind complex, and because of this instrument, a certain understanding is possible. This understanding is possible because of the enlivening principle, the consciousness. Now, am I going to claim the body mind as myself or the consciousness as myself? And that you hear in the Mundaka, and that came in Trishudamasu also. Why claim the instrument as yourself, which is a perishing temporary entity, although it is the bokta for now? Claim the higher bird as yourself. We will learn a little more of this in the next set of speakers, that will be Ullas. But there is one more verse, the second verse, 216. The take-home message of this verse is just this. By now, Vidyaranya Swami has told us who is the bokta, who is the experiencer. That is the Chidabhasa. But he's using this Chidabhasa to help us to make a Vedanta Vichara, which will help us to go from Bhogya, the object of experience, to Bhokta, to Sakshi, which will be more clear when Ullas will speak to us. Ullas, please.
Thank you, sir. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. As sir said, it is difficult. However many times we go through these things, it appears kind of ununderstandable and all, and it is difficult. The solution, however, is given in this verse. The last two words, punah punaha, is the main message here. That, and I'll just come to the crux of the verse first and then explain it, that punah punaha, we have to keep doing this Shravana Manana Nididhyasana again and again, every day, all the time. Then is only when this is going to internalize. Otherwise, it's only going to remain an academic exercise. So now coming back to the verse, we have been seeing Chidabhasa and Sakshi. So here we are going to see in the previous verse that was told that Chidabhasa is the Mithya aspect. Mithya aspect of the Mithya universe itself. So what happens is that in the Sushupti, it says Sushuptyadau Vilopasya. Sushuptyadau means in the deep sleep state, etc., which means in the waking, in the dream, in the deep sleep. This Chidabhasa is there. I experience it. I experience in the waker as I experience the space and time that I'm located somewhere, etc., in that way. But in the Sushupti, what happens is that this Chidabhasa gets resolved, just like the entire universe gets resolved. But the interesting thing is, even though it is resolved, I experience its absence. So one more time, I experience the absence of Chidabhasa during deep sleep state. And who is the one who is experiencing that absence? And how can I say that I experience the absence? Because when I wake up, I say I had a good deep sleep. So somebody is experiencing that deep sleep. And this, whoever this somebody is experiencing this deep sleep, is available even when that absence is happening of Chidabhasa. And that is the Sakshi. And in Vedanta, we know that Mithya and Satya, the difference is that Satya is always existent in all the three states and in all conditions. So the Sakshi is the one who is available even when my waking state is there, dream state is there, even when my deep sleep state is there. It is the one who is experiencing all these three states. So Vilopasya Sushuptyadau Sakshina Hinubhuyate. He is the one who is actually deeply experiencing all of that. But etadrisham swaswabhavam, this my actual nature is experienced how? Vivinakti. How do I discern all that? By doing this Vedanta Shravana Manana Nididhyasana every day, all the time. This does not happen in just one class that we come and then we'll say, in the class what happens is, in that 1 hour we feel this, I am actually the Sakshi, I am the Atma. But when we are doing our Vyavaharik Jagat, again I fall back to the original, all the problematic self. Because what happens is, we are actually a mixture of both the two. We are a mixture of Chidabhasa and the Sakshi. In fact, that mixture, I personally feel that it's also kind of a shortage of language. That's why we say that, because Chidabhasa is like wrinkles in the cloth. The wrinkles appear to be there, but they're not really there. But we can't say that they are not, like I can see them. The cloth is the reality. So once we say that, okay, I'm a mixture of the wrinkles in the cloth, but what happens is, the moment we start identifying with the real aspect, the Sakshi aspect, then the problems are resolved. Otherwise, but what happens is, after the class, we fall back into identifying ourselves again with the wrinkles or with the Chidabhasa, with the Mithya aspect, and that is where all the problems appear. For example, in the dream, if we know that, okay, I am the waker who is dreaming, then all the problems in the dream will just disappear. But it doesn't really happen. But imagine if that so happens. Similarly, if in the waking state, if I imagine that, okay, I am actually the Turiya who is experiencing all these things, then all the problems that we see in the waking state, they will also go away. But again, all this is going to happen if we do punah punaha of this Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam, then I will realize about my Swaswabhavam. Next slide, which is the next verse. It says Vivichanasham Nishchitya. Once I have this discernment that these two are different, Vivicha, having clearly understood that Nasham Nishchitya, the destruction is certain. Whose destruction? Not my destruction, the destruction of this Chidabhasa, this Mithya entity. Now here the destruction can happen in two ways. One is the falsification of this Chidabhasa. Slowly and slowly I start realizing that, yeah, like these wrinkles appear to be there, but they're not really there. I mean, you will still see them, but in the heart of your heart, you would know that these are nothing but the cloth itself. So the Chidabhasa still appears, but its Nasham is Nishchitya through this discernment. And so there are two types in which it can happen. One is while we are alive itself, we know, okay, this whole thing is a drama, this is a Karnataka, this is a whole natak is going on. So that is the Jivan Mukti aspect. The second is the physical destruction of the Chidabhasa itself, when the medium itself is gone, that is the Videha Mukti part. So either way, with this Vivichya, with this constant Shravana Manan Nididhyasanam, this Nasham is Nishchitya. There is a guarantee given to us. And when that happens, Punarbhogam na vanchati. Now, what type of a desire you will really have, right? When you, for example, when you have seen that I am actually the Sakshi, all these desires kind of appear from that Chidabhasa, where it knows that I'm limited, I'm in space and time, and I need to expand myself to gain more and more happiness. But if you know that I am the Sakshi, I'm already Purna, Shuddha, Buddha, Mukta and all, then there is no Bhogam that you would still ask for. An example is given is Mumurshuhu, somebody who is on the deathbed, who is about to die in, let's say, a few hours. Shayito Bhumau, who's already kept down on the floor, that okay, he is about to leave us now. Now, if you ask them, Vivaham ko vivanchati, can we find a girl for you to marry, or any other desire for that matter? What more is he? Am I going to marry? What type of a girl it is? Will she agree to me? All those things become so immaterial. Just like if I were to ask you, do you want to play with a balloon? It's not that you don't like balloons, but from a 5-year-old's perspective, the balloon is like everything. But from our perspective, it's like, yeah, we have gone over that. It's not that we have killed that desire or suppressed that desire. It's just we have gone over it. So once we have matured, we don't have as much requirement for a balloon. Same way, once we have done this Vivichya through Shravana Manan Nididhyasana, all the fade away in presence of the sun, like stars fade away. So that is the message. So we've seen that Chidabhasa is here, Sakshi is Satya, mixture of the two. We need to identify with the Sakshi part of it. Once we do that, then all these desires, worldly desires, we can continue to do our transactional part of it, but then they are not really binding desires, and then we can live peacefully. Thank you, sir. Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Ullas, for explaining very clearly two more difficult verses. Now, again, as Ullas also mentioned, these are verses where we have to do our own homework. How many times? Puna punaha. Unless we go through this again and again, this we have to dwell upon it repeatedly. And what do we need to dwell upon it? See, there is something in me which comes and goes. Whatever disappears when you are fast asleep. When you are fast asleep, that which you consider as you, the real one, has disappeared. But still there is someone else who has said, I have slept well. Can we identify with that higher one who's there all the time and who does not undergo aging or undergoing sickness? So Vidyaranya is helping us to discover our true nature, at the same time negating the bokta in all of us. Who is this bokta, this Chidabhasha? Vidyaranya Swami clearly tells us, Nasham Nischitya. Have this determination to finish this fellow off while you are alive. Now, what do we need to do? See, there is an entity in me, that is the ego, my lower self, that has to be weakened in every experience. And how do we weaken it? In our day-to-day life, we have enough of opportunities. Whenever you are hurt, whenever you are insulted, hurt or upset, whether justified or not, is always self-damaging. Each time you get hurt, remember your ego has been awakened. This is the pseudo-bokta which Vidyaranya Swami has told us, which has to be falsified. This is the process of kasya kamaya. I need to falsify it, and therefore, while I am alive, let this body go away. Let this body means this identification with the body mind, because as long as I am body mind, as long as this ego is there, desires will always be there. I will remain unfulfilled. Tripti is going to be a dream. But if I'm able to work on this ego and see that he becomes, very just functional, like that roasted seed example. Now, this is the remnant of the great temple of in Jerusalem, where there was a great priest called Nicodemus. Nicodemus was among the high priests of the ancient temple of Jerusalem, and he heard so much about Jesus. But being a great person in that temple, he could not go to who was considered as a vagabond teacher, a very ordinary teacher, but who was attracting hundreds of people. He knew there was something charismatic about Jesus, but he didn't have the courage to meet him in public. Late in the night, when the whole city was asleep, he approached Jesus and asked him to teach him something, because I know there is something great about you. And you know what Jesus tells him? Unless you die as you are, and unless you are reborn. This is the teaching of Jesus. Unless you die and you are reborn. Die what? Die as the ego and be born to your real nature. From now on, you will see a little shift, and this is the shift between Kasya Kamaya to Anusanjvaret. Vidya, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Ityabhipreetya bhoktaram akshipatya vishankaya kasya kamayeti tataha shariranu nahi. Till Shloka 221, Swami Vidyaranya clearly negates the bhokta with the expression kasya kamaya. The expression kasya kamaya states that there is no possibility of the existence of an experiencer. Experiencer sense negating totally the very existence of the experiencer. There is no one experiencing the joy or sorrow. The state of realization is the experience taking place in the absence of the experiencer. So, there is an act without the actor, experience without the experiencer, meaning that the identification with the experience has no value at all. Therefore, kasya kamaya means for whose sake, who is the experiencer. Once the fact that the desirer is an illusion is established, who is to desire and what? Ityabhipretya means keeping all this in mind. The triputis of bhoktra, bhogya and bhoga, when this is negated, the cause of suffering is no more. Yavishankaya, without any doubt. This shoka nivritti is the sixth stage, which is the result indicated by shariram anusanjvaret. Therefore, he says shariram anusvanjvaret nahi. Next slide. To reach the seventh rung of the ladder, the trapti prapti is for to reach the stage of trapti prapti. This crossing over is inevitable. After jnana, there is no more samsara, which is called sharira anujwara, which is discussed in the next shloka. Sthulam sukshmam karanam cha shariram trividham smritam avashyam trividhostyeva tatra tatrochito jwaraha. The commentary on Shariram Anusanjvaret starts from this verse and goes up to shloka number 250. Even Adi Shankaracharya writes only 3 lines on the expression. Jwarati means to suffer any form of pain. Jwara is the noun form of Jwarati, noun form, and into two types. One is direct suffering, which is called Jwarati or Jwara. The second one is indirect suffering caused by our identification with anatma, which has direct suffering. This indirect suffering is called anujvara. If any family member goes through any form of suffering, maybe 10,000 miles away, this is called Jwara. But the indirect suffering is gone through by the people who are close to them here, either in the form of ahankara and mamakara. The three forms of anujvara is mentioned in Vedanta. The first one is identifying with the world, and suffering is the gross form of anujvara. Next slide, doctor. Second one is identifying with the family, which is the subtle form of anujvara. Third one is identifying with the Sharira Trayam, which is the subtlest and the toughest form of Anujvara. This is very difficult to give up, and here the Upanishad says, Shariram Anusanjvaret. Upanishad is negating freedom from Shariratraya Abhimana Janya Anujvaraha, the indirect suffering one goes through because of one's identification with Shariratraya. I as Atma can have only Anujvara, and I as Atma can never have Jwara. That is the direct suffering. So all pains that we claim are Anujvara only, definitely not Jwara. Swami Vidyaranya says, the removal of Anujvara alone will lead to Trapti Prapti, which is the seventh stage of moksha. We have to give up the sixth stage of Shoka Nivritti to reach this final stage. According to Swami Vidyaranya, Anuchvara issue is an intellectual problem born out of Atma, Anatma, Avivekaha. He talks about Sharira Jwara, slowly leading to Sharira Anujvara. Then he talks about Sharira Anujvara Nivritti. This is the topic for the next 28 shlokas. Shariram word is used in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Vedanta talks about Sharira Trayam, Stula Sharira Jwara, Stula Sharira Anujvara, Stula Sharira Anujvara Nivritti. Same thing in the case of Sukshma and Karana Sharirams too. Totally 9 topics. After the threefold Sharirams, Swami Vidyaranya says Tatra, meaning each Sharira has its own intrinsic Jwara of its own, which is choiceless and cannot be eliminated. Uchita, meaning appropriate and relevant. There is no such thing as Jwara, Jwara-free Sharira, but Jwara-free Shariri is possible. Here, Jwara can be any intrinsic problem in each anatma. Then the adjective avashya is added, which means it will definitely be there. There is no perfect Stula Sharira, no perfect Sukshma Sharira, and no perfect Karana Sharira, which he will deal with in the forthcoming verses. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Vidya, for giving us a nice introduction to the next topic that has come about the three bodies and what is Jwara and Anujvara. In this transition verse between Kasya Kamaya and Sharira Anusanjare, we have to understand about negating the bokta. That means we have to allow the bokta to have a natural death, you know, as Jesus said, unless you die. Because as long as there is ego, there will be suffering. That means, I think it has been spoken already by Vidya, how you can experience without the experiencer. If you can have, then there is no experiencer who is born in every experience. That is what is called self-realization. It has also been explained when you suffer any physical problem directly, that is called Jwara. But then when there is an indirect suffering, then when we exaggerate a physical problem and get upset about it and say why this has happened, or when we internalize a problem that has happened to somebody else, that means somebody else is who? I am not this body, but the body is going through certain things and I Chinmatroham Sadashiva. The Sadashiva identifies with the pain and the suffering of the gross subtle body, and that is what is called Anujwara. Swamiji says that those who know the truth reject the bokta. For them, there will be no misery. In the next set of talks, we will understand the three bodies and the three kinds of afflictions in these three bodies. Dr. Anupama, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, verses 227 and 229. We have heard about the various jwaras of the Sharira Traya. Now just consider this. Can we put an end to all the afflictions of our three Shariras? Can we be free of disease, stress, and ignorance? At what stage of our lives do these jwaras inflict our Sharira? The answer is Ete Jwara Sharireshu Trishu Swabhavika Mataha. The three jwaras are intrinsic. That means they are the upadana karana of the three bodies. Yatra yatra shariram tatra tatra jwaraha. So, when is the body totally free from jwaras? Only when the sharira drops dead. This means it is not possible to eliminate jwaras and retain the body. Three examples are given here to convey the intrinsic nature of jwara. First, tanto viyujyena pataha. Can cloth be separated from thread? Balebhya kambalaha. Can a woolen blanket be separate from the sheep's fur? Mrida gatastata. Can a pot be separate from clay? This means Sharira and Jwara cannot be separated. So what do? We have to attack the Anujwara. I have Anujwara only when I identify with Sharira Traya. What is Anujwara? It is a self-judgment, a self-conclusion that I am a samsari. Is there any sadhana to cure Jwara? No. Vedanta tells us that by dissociating from Anatma, by claiming that I am Asanga Atma, by claiming Abhimana Tyaga, Anujwara is cured. Next verse, Chidabhase Swataha Ka Api Jwara Nasti. Does Chaitanya have Jwara? No. Both Bimba Chaitanya and Pratibimba Chaitanya do not have Jwara. Why? Because Chaitanya is of the nature of light of consciousness. Prakasheka Swabhavatvam Eva Drashtam. For example, when we see the reflection of the sun on a mirror, any dirt on the mirror cannot taint the reflected sun, and certainly not the original sun. Similarly, the Jwara from the Sharira, which is compared to the mirror, cannot afflict either the Bimba or the Pratibimba Chaitanya. So we know that both Chit and Chidabhasa do not have Jwara. Chidabhase swataha ka api Jwara nasti. But due to the proximity of Sharira Traya to Chidabhasa, the Jwara of Sharira is transferred or superimposed onto Chidabhasa. This is what we call Anujwara. To conclude, when I claim that I am Chit, I am free from all Jwaras. As Chidabhasa, the only Jwara that I can have is Anujwara. And this can be removed by dissociating from Sharira and associating with the Chit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anupama. That was very crisp and very clear about what is Jwara and what is Anujwara. As long as we have a body, we will have Jwaras affecting the body. But then, as Dr. Anupama said, Jwaras will be there with the body. What we can do with Anujwara, we should not internalize it on ourselves. Chinmatroham Sadashiva. How can Sadashiva have any Jwara? Also very clearly said, we have this reflecting medium that is the body-mind complex, and from them comes the reflected consciousness, which is Chidabhasa. Chidabhasa, which is of the nature of light, cannot have any Jwaras itself, and that will be explained in the next talk by Padma. As doctors, what do we treat? We treat all Jwaras. That means when people come with certain problems, we understand what is the problem. We are able to internalize. Even though it does not affect us directly, we treat them with all compassion as if it is a member of the family, but then we are not affected because there is no sense of mamakara. A doctor is able to objectively deal with the problem, but do not subjectively feel upset about it. That is the way we have to treat our bodily problems, and do not create an anujwara. Don't have a sense of identification. The moment there is an identification, that means if a doctor is treating one's own family member, then there is so much of identification, your sense of judgment becomes affected, because now the child's Jwara or the family member's Jwara affects the treating doctor who also has Anujwara. A doctor with Anujwara is not qualified to treat. So if we have to handle our problems, we have to handle our bodily problem as if you are a physician treating somebody. Padma, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. चिताभासेत्य संभाव्या ज्वरा साक्षिणी का कथा एवं एवै कथाम मेने चिताभासे च विद्यया. In the earlier verses, Swami Vidyaranya has said that Chidabhasa by itself has no jvaraha, that is suffering or afflictions, because it is not different from Chit. It does not have independent identity and is entirely dependent on Chit, and it is merely its reflection. It mixes or merges with Chit, but cannot add to the illumination of Chit. Because Chit, Kutastha Chaitanya, is of unchanging nature. It is like the moon has no illumination of its own. It reflects the illumination of the sun. The first part of the verse, Chita bhase api jvaraha, asambhavya sakshini ka katha. Chita bhase api jvaraha. Jwara is not possible for Chidabhasa. Imagine the sun's rays on a muddy puddle of water. The reflection of the sunlight does not get sullied or tainted by the condition of the muddy water. And Sakshini Ka Katha means, then what to say of the sunlight which falls or reflects on the rivers, seas, oceans, etc. Its reflection all remain unchanged in its pristine form. Meaning, what to say of the consciousness, Kutastha Chaitanya, which is the same in you, me, and all the million of subtle bodies in the universe, without any afflictions. This consciousness is Paramarthika Satya. Sharira is Vyauharika or Mithya. Jwara is also Mithya. Chitabhasa is also Mithya. Chit alone is Satya. The second part of the verse, Evam api Chitabhasa avidyaya ekatam mene. Evam api. However, the Chidabhasa, due to avidya, ignorance, ekatam mene accepts identification. When there is no possibility of afflictions on Chidabhasa, it cannot also be in Sakshi, that is consciousness. So, if suffering Jwaraha is absolutely impossible for both Chit and Chidabhasa, how does one experience suffering? Sharira Traya is a reflecting medium. Sakshi is my original nature, said Lord Krishna, while talking of Para Prakriti and Apara Prakriti. He said, Chidabhasa is my Apara Prakriti and Chit is my original Prakriti. The Chidabhasa identifies or considers itself in a state of oneness with the body and mind instead of claiming to be nothing but Chit. And because of avidya, ignorance, maya, this anujvara, that is mistaking the body, mind, sense complex as the I, is a source of suffering. It is mental, cognitive, or perceptual concept, occurring only in the intellect or mind. The Kutastha Chaitanya is immune to modifications. The Shariratraya, the three bodies, are of nature of constant modification. Therefore, the Chidabhasa is totally dependent on these two factors, the Kutastha Chaitanya and the constant modification or affliction of the body. Swami Paramarthanandaji says, Chidabhasa is fictitious, illusory entity, begins to imagine to be real. With these false notions, born of delusion, the true nature of Sakshi, Chit, the individual identifies with Shariratraya and superimposes adhyasa, the affliction of the bodies on itself, then becomes bokta, experiencer. The afflicted individual and karta bhokta factor, the I factor, comes in. The self-afflicted sorrows, like I am sad, I am happy, I am Indian, I am engineer, so on. The next verse, putra dareshu tapyatyasu tapamiti yathavrta manyate purushas tadvad abhaso apyabhimanyate. Just as an ordinary man unnecessarily considers himself to be suffering when his son or wife suffers, in the same way, the Chidabhasa, Jiva, also considers itself to be the body and suffers when the body suffers. We have seen our grandparents, parents, and ourselves go through ups and downs in life, pain and pleasure, success and failures in family. More the proximity or emotional closeness, relationship to people, more the misery or suffering. This situation can be adhyatmika, adibhautika, or adidaivika, or shariratraya. The Chitabhasa accepts the afflictions of the bodies to be its own because of delusion. Neither the misery nor the delusion is real. It is like, can the reflection of the sun own the bucket and water it reflects as its own? It is illusionary afflictions of the illusory individual. In Vedanta, we identify the problem of suffering. The unique teachings of Advaita Vedanta is to demonstrate root cause of our own suffering, truth of what you are, Atma, and who you are not, Anatma. Hari Om. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Padma, for a nice explanation of what is Jwara and Anujwara. And although this part is easy to understand, what is Jwara and what is Anujwara, but in real life, when a family member is affected, when your possessions are lost, when there is a problem with your job, or when something happens to your own body, to be able to say, it is my body, it is not me, that is real Vedanta. Now, that is the real, from an understanding level, it is possible. But whenever a problem happens, to be able to make that distinction and to be able to find that gap between I am Atma Brahma. Anything that happens to my body and mind cannot really affect me because I am of a higher order of reality. I am the illuminator. Now, this is the crux of Vedanta. That is where Vedanta becomes so difficult, because even though we are able to understand, this identification should be so sharp that I'm able to see, I'm able to be the illuminator and not to be affected. Anaga, please.
Thank you, dear speakers, and Dr. Hegde sir, for giving us a clear roadmap of how to rise over and above our desires. We also learned that we must give up identifying with our most beloved body through all its pain and pleasures. This holds the key to the penultimate stage of our spiritual journey, Shokha Nivritti. Pain is inevitable, but there can be freedom from suffering. It sounds impossible, but Panchadashi is leading us right there. Our gratitude to all our viewers for staying with us through these transformational shlokas. Please join us on the 16th of October at 6:45 p.m. as we inch towards Tripti. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you.